Tatin, apple tart, a story of caramel and apples, the burning of sugar, the flavour of apple, beautifully crispy puff pastry, and a stunning kick of cognac. Let's get it. Now, Tatin is famed by the Tatin sisters who worked in France in Hotel Tatin. Now, there is a story that they dropped the pan after it came out of the oven, and that's why the tart is upside down. It's about the burning of the caramel, the depth of the flavour, creating that dark, deep sugar, and then allowing that to coat and cook the apples under that lid of pastry. Now, when you're talking about Tatin, apples are the first thing that come to mind, but you've got to get your variety right. For me, it's Pink Lady. They're versatile, they've got a great sweetness, and the structure of the apple lends itself perfectly to this dish. It will cook, it will soften, but it will still keep its shape. So you end up with a beautifully formed, perfectly soft apple underneath your Tatin. So stalk out, take a knife, and I just like to turn the apple and take away the inside layer of the core on the top and on the bottom. And then with the peeler, round the outside of that curve, and you just take the rest off. Long stripes. Get yourself a speed peeler. They work so much better. You don't end up with an apple that looks like a 50p pence. You end up with this beautifully smooth apple. Now, in Michelin-star restaurants, they will peel their apples the night before and leave them in the fridge. Yes, they will oxidize slightly, but because you're cooking this tart in brown caramel, it doesn't matter either way. What they're doing is they're drying the apple out in the fridge. They're exposing the flesh to the air, which concentrates the flavor and reduces the moisture. Cora, straight down the middle, and then with your knife, just into quarters. One top tip I would say is try and cut your apples as even as possible, and that just allows even cooking. Now, I'm using a medium-sized pan that is completely metal. This pan is safe to go into the oven. A Tatin is as much about the pan than it is about the cooking technique and the apples that you cook with. The pan is imperative. Make sure it's medium sized, perfect amount for the caramel that we're making, and it'll allow it to create that perfect even cooking. Now, people worry when they start caramels. They worry they're going to crystallize the sugar. They worry about burning, they worry about all sorts of things. So what I like to use is honey. It's an inverted sugar, and it allows the caramelization of honey with a safeguard that you're not going to get any crystallization inside that pan. So once your pans come up to heat, the honey goes straight in. And because that honey is already at a syrup stage, we can go the sugar straight after. Now, in order to give a nod to the original recipe, you need to burn the caramel slightly. That's where the heritage of this dish came from. She saw the apples were over caramelizing in the butter and the sugar. She put a pastry lid on top. That went into the oven to stop the moisture evaporating any longer and to try and even out the caramelization of the apples. So when you're making your caramel, you've got to take it quite dark. And because that honey's in there, I'm not scared to give this a stir. The variety of apple that we're using is sweet, so you can go dark with this caramel. If you go too light, you'll lose the integrity of what it is. You want deep, dark, golden brown apples, pearls above that stunning crispy pastry. So as soon as you see that foam start to break, get the heat off and add the butter. Now, what the butter does, it will regulate the temperature, start to create the emulsification. So you end up with a beautifully homogenized, thick caramel. At this stage, you can leave this natural. I like to add some flavor in. So we're gonna go in with a split vanilla pod, cognac, a touch of apple vinegar, just for some acidity, and a good pinch of flake sea salt. Now, the moisture in the cognac, the moisture in the vinegar, all that's gonna do is help the emulsification of the fat from the butter and the caramelized sugar. At this stage, we're going to take a little bit out, just into a bowl. Now, some people may say, Aaron, what are you doing putting vinegar anywhere near a dessert? But it needs a tiny bit of acidity to cut through the sweetness, cut through the fat from the butter, and give this dish a perfect balance. The salt helps balance the sugar. The vanilla gives that stunning, simply French aroma that you get with all good desserts. So if you haven't tried putting vinegar in your Tatin as of yet, give it a go. Now, when you're putting your booze into your caramel as well, I've used cognac because I like it, but you can use Calvados, you can use whiskey, you can use rum. I would go for a darker spirit just because they add that richness of flavor that you need to stand up to the caramel and the apple. Our caramel is cooling, and we can leave this till it goes pretty hard. In the meantime, we're gonna make our egg wash for our pastry. So 1 egg, cracked, and 1 yolk goes straight in. So once your caramel's cooled slightly, it's not completely cold, you basically want it a little bit cooler just so the caramel tightens up slightly and it holds the apples in place. It just makes the building of the tatin a little bit easier. So what I want to do is take these little quarters and just lay them down, one on each other around the outside of the pan. And they will slide at first and move around slightly. Don't be too precious about the placing of them, just getting them in there is the most important thing. And if you can, leave your biggest piece for the middle. The puff pastry. This is shop brought. I don't mind that. Now, if you want to make it yourself, if I get 20 comments saying make puff, then I'll make a puff pastry video. But for this, we're just going with shop brought. What I want to do is just take the rim off slightly, just so it fits in the pan a little bit better. And this is rough, because you're going to crimp in the edges anyway. Take your apples onto the board, puff pastry in your hand, and then you just lay over the top. Crimp in the sides. At this stage, we're ready for the egg wash. So be very gentle and be generous with the egg wash all over the top of your tatin. Now with a sharp knife, just score in the middle. That'll allow any steam to come out during cooking. In the oven. Half an hour's up, he's done. Beautiful golden brown. The apples are soft, the pastry's cooked, the caramel is mixing with that juice from the apples, and it's created this beautiful sauce around the outside of the pan. Now, because the pectin in the apples has been released, it's mixed with that caramel. We want it to create a little sheen layer over the apples, and that's gonna take about 6 or 7 hours of being out in a cool room for that to happen, if you can wait that long. So when your tatin is fully chilled and the pectin is set, you need to turn it out. I've got myself a wooden board. I'm just gonna turn it over onto it. Take it off. Now, all that's left to do is take this leftover caramel and spoon it generously over the top. And that's it, a perfect tart tatin. The caramelized, softened apples, the beautiful crunch of that pastry, the cognac, the vanilla, the hit from the salt, the touch of vinegar, all working in unison to create this absolutely stunning dessert. Vanilla tart tatin, done. And thank you.